For every kiss, a bullet in the face. For every action, a reaction. For every event, there exists a potential, a mirror event, an exact opposite possibility. If the world you know is one of Marvel's, where heroic women walk invisibly through horror and men of fire ride the upper reaches of the air, then only a misstep or a stopped heartbeat away is a world of ruins. Alright everybody, let's talk about Marvel ruins. Now we're all familiar with the Marvel Universe and its wondrous heroes, but what if I told you about a tale where everything went wrong? At the start of the story we see an old man in what looks like a wasteland, and above him he just watched a jet explode, watching the superhumans of this world die in the most horrific way possible. But it only gets worse. Now, the old man in the story that I'm about to tell you is called Philip Sheldon. He's a photographer for the Daily Bugle, and he's writing a book about how the world went wrong. And one of the first of many people that he's interviewing and writing about is actually Tony Stark. And while writing about his story, it seems somewhat the same as his original origin story, but there's much more to be told later. On top of this, the Avengers did exist in this world, but they never did become the legends that we know of today. And Philip Sheldon can't help but think that the world that he lives in today could have been greater. It could have had Marvels. It could have had legends. Now, after a few days have passed, Philip Sheldon had found himself at a bar just wanting a drink while reading his newspaper about Matthew Murdoch, a kid that died in a truck accident. The bartender approaches him, and all he wants is an OJ. However, any peace that the man had while reading his newspaper was quickly interrupted by a hairy, smelly, decaying man, threatening to kill Philip Sheldon if he doesn't give him a drink. But the bartender quickly interrupts him and tells Philip that he's harmless, he has a bone disease, and he's dying. And if you couldn't tell already, it's Logan. It's also here where we get to see a peek as to what the Avengers actually looked like in this world, where T'Challa joined the Black Panther movement and was sent to jail, Hawkeye was executed in public, and Iron Man became a serial killer. Moving on from the bar, Philip Sheldon would find himself at a nuclear test zone. But it's not only a nuclear test zone, it's also an internment camp for the Kree warriors, forced to live out in some of the most horrific living environments known to man. The Kree warriors had no other choice but to land onto Earth due to Silver Surfer being destroyed from the inside out and releasing too much cosmic energy to their ship. This would end up destroying the ship's cloaking mechanism, and Earth's forces down below would send nuclear bombs up to the ship in hopes to destroy it. With no other option, they had to crash land onto Earth and be subjected to the worst living environments known to mankind. They wouldn't be given anything to help their kind survive, and be forced to live out the rest of their days knowing that their race would soon come to an end. After leaving the test zone, Philip Sheldon finds himself in Washington, D.C., or what it used to be. Because now, Washington, D.C. is known for its drug use, crime, and its havoc. But Philip Sheldon isn't just here to stand around, he's looking to interview Nick Fury. It's also here that we find out that Nick Fury only agreed to be interviewed due to Philip Sheldon dying. Nick Fury then asks why he's being called to be interviewed, and Philip Sheldon tells him that he's writing a book. And Nick Fury takes this the wrong way and gut punches him. But Philip Sheldon clears the air by telling him that he only called him down to write a book because he's writing about the Marvels that could have been in this world, and that Nick Fury knew who Captain America was. So Nick Fury agrees to answer some questions for Philip Sheldon for his book. And one of the first things that he tells Philip Sheldon is that Captain America introduced him to eating human meat. However, while Nick Fury is answering some of Philip's questions, Jean Grey, better known as the Dark Phoenix, approaches Nick Fury as a hooker. But as she's talking to Nick Fury just shoots the hell out of her. And after killing Jean Grey, he tells Philip that if you want to survive in this world, you have to be a mutant. There isn't any more room for good people. Right as he puts his own gun to his head, telling Philip that he was always clean. He never did this to his country, and he has to take a short nap right before pulling the trigger. And with that dramatic ending, Philip is on to the next interview. On top of this, we also see in a newspaper article that Galactus is floating in space dead, and we don't know why, but he's just floating around Mars. But following this, we end up seeing Philip Sheldon actually going to interview Rick Jones. And real quick, if you don't know who Rick Jones is, he's actually one of the best friends of the Incredible Hulk. However, when we meet Rick Jones, he's actually not doing well, drinking out of a jar full of morphine. And in his words, it's to ease his pain. But cutting to the chase, Rick Jones ends up telling him about the story in Arizona that he's been writing to him about for a while now. And the story Rick Jones begins to tell is actually pretty much the same thing that happened in the original comic books, with Rick Jones being pushed out of the way and Bruce Banner absorbing all of the gamma radiation. However, this is Marvel Ruins, so it doesn't pan out the same way that it happens in the original universe. It actually ends up way worse. Because after Bruce Banner saves Rick Jones and absorbs all of the gamma radiation, he comes out as this hulking mass of tumors, and he's completely grotesque, but he's somewhat alive at the same time. You can see his eye popping out, his muscles being deformed, his rib cage out. He's just a mess. However, it gets even more messed up when Rick Jones actually tells Philip Sheldon that Bruce Banner never died. He's just being experimented on now, just going further down the rabbit hole of darkness. And following this, not even minutes after leaving Rick Jones's apartment, he goes downstairs and leaves the apartment complex to find the Punisher gunned down. And after seeing the Punisher's dead corpse, Philip Sheldon can't help but think that he's just feeling death all over him. That it's in his veins, it's in his blood, it's even in his tissue. He can almost taste it, and he doesn't want to die, not yet. He has to tell the story of how this world failed, how it could have been something better. But the story doesn't end here, as when Philip Sheldon enters the airport and gets on his plane to leave Chicago, he actually bumps into Mystique, and when he asks to interview her, she ends up going a little bit crazy. Because in this world, she has dissociative identity disorder due to all of the shape-shifting abilities that she can do, and she starts to go mad and shape-shift into different things and slowly kills herself. But hours later, after he deplanes and the world seems somewhat at peace, it goes awry again, with riots quickly forming at the airport that he just landed in. And unfortunately, one bodyguard actually knocks down a hippie and everything goes wrong. Because the hippie was actually a Magneto that never mastered his powers and instead used a magnetic amplifier to control his powers. But the bodyguard destroyed it and it caused mayhem in the airport. It first started with small things like paper clips and tooth fillings, but as fast as it was going, the larger things were approaching him like airplanes, and it quickly destroyed the entire airport, leaving only a few hundred survivors, and among one of those survivors was Philip Sheldon. However, this doesn't stop Philip Sheldon's quest to write the Book of Marvels, because he ends up in Texas days later interviewing the Kingpin in this world. And on top of this, he's also in the president's basement where he keeps all of the mutants that were too dangerous for the world that he also tortures. And it actually gets even more messed up because one of the first mutants that we end up seeing is actually Cyclops with his eyes completely burned off. And the further down the hallway they both go, we see heroes that are completely warped, like Nightcrawler eating his own tail to survive, Kitty Pryde losing most of her intestines, Quicksilver's limbs completely cut off, and we also find out that Professor X doesn't help these people. Instead, he mocks them and makes fun of them, spending most of his days torturing these mutants and belittling them, giving them almost the same kind of treatment that the Kree warriors get. It's just sad, and when I read this, I couldn't help but tear up a little bit. However, after all the brutality that Philip had seen, he just wanted to escape it and find somewhere somewhat normal where he could recollect on everything that he's writing about. And he can't help but feel bad for the people that were in this world that could have been legends. However, he carries on with his journey, interviewing someone posing as Thor, but it's actually just a regular doctor named Donald Blake that had succumbed to drugs and a cult, believing that Thor existed in this world. And right below it is Emma Frost, who actually adopts children with autism and does experiments on them to bring out their psychic abilities, as she likes to call them. Following this, the next person on Philip Sheldon's list is actually Johnny Blaze, who we know as the Ghost Rider. But in the world of Ruins, he's actually a stunt driver whose main attraction is pouring gasoline on his head and lighting his head on fire. However, the stunt would end up going horribly wrong, and his entire head would blaze in fire, and he would end up dying in the process. However, the people at the event that day said that he drove around on his motorcycle for hours, screaming endlessly due to the fire on his head. After seeing this, Philip ends up going to bed this night and dreams of a world of marvels where Captain America and Iron Man are actual heroes, and they defeat villains like President X and show the world that they can be better. However, Philip Sheldon always has to wake up to the reality that this is never going to be the case, that these heroes will never exist. Following this, we actually see Philip Sheldon getting ready to interview Ben Grimm for the story about the Fantastic Four, or what they could have been. Ben Grimm and Reed Richards had been working on an aircraft to go through space and study cosmic rays called the Astrea. However, the work that had to be done on the spacecraft wouldn't be finished until maybe 1965, but Reed Richards wasn't patient enough. He tried telling the government that the Astrea was ready for deployment, but the government wasn't having it. They wanted to be finished first. So Reed Richards decided to steal it, and he wanted Ben Grimm to pilot it, but Ben Grimm refused. Ben Grimm would tell Reed Richards that it wouldn't be ready for a few months, so he couldn't do it. So instead, Reed Richards turned to Victor Von Doom to pilot the Astrea, and in turn, what happened was completely horrific. They had flown into a flash storm of cosmic radiation, and it altered all of their bodies on a cellular level, causing Reed's body to elasticize, killing him instantly. Johnny Storm's entire body caught fire on a cellular level, and Susan Storm's body was completely invisible, and they didn't find the body until one day where somebody fell on her by accident. And apparently when Victor Von Doom came back down, he was nothing but minerals. And after telling the story, Ben Grimm just can't help but think that if he was the pilot, he could have saved all of them. And that was Philip's last interview. He came back to New York City and he figured out the name for his book. He would call it Marvels. He has all the notes, he has all the interviews, he could write the book without even looking. But in this world, nothing goes as planned because Philip doesn't have enough time to write the book anymore. Because Peter Parker stole that time from him, and he has no more pills. And you might be asking, how did Peter Parker steal that time from him? Well, Peter Parker actually got bitten by a radioactive spider, and it didn't give him powers. It gave him a disease. An irradiated mutant virus that is completely infectious, and Philip Sheldon shook his hand before the rashes showed. And that disease that killed Peter Parker soon caught up to Philip Sheldon. And without his pills, he stood no chance against the infection. Succumbing to the disease and falling over, losing all of the hard work he fought so hard to collect. The story of Marvels that Philip Sheldon wished he could tell to the world would never come to fruition, and instead he would just die in an alleyway. Because this isn't a world of wonders, this is a world of ruins. And with that, the story ends. I hope you all liked it and enjoyed it as much as I did. Leave a like down below and comment what you would like me to cover next. I would really like to know. Thank you again, and have a good day.